I want to read. I want to share a little bit with you now. This is an article that was published in the Atlantic this week by Franklin Foer. The headline is "Columbia University's Anti-Semitism Problem." Now, before I read you some selections from this article, like Grant, what is your response to like the blizzard of condemnation and justification for the deportation of foreign students and the suppression of freedom of speech and academic freedom at the institution you were recently a member of, that has been justified entirely on the idea that this protest movement has been a cauldron of violent anti-Semitic activity?
I mean, it's all just fake. It's all manufactured. To anybody who's visited the encampments last year, can tell you that the gap between how they were reported on and the actual reality is just, again, much like how they're doing with Mahmoud now, just quite insane. I mean, what the encampments were, students sort of sitting on a lawn, and they turn any sort of attempt to say, well, if you go to the Gaza Solidarity encampment and you're yelling at people and waving a Israeli flag and threatening to dox people and filming people, if you are politely asked to leave, that is essentially establishing sort of a Jew-free zone, of which there are many, many Jewish people.
Well, I'd like to open with Franklin. Franklin begins his piece as such with probably the funniest first sentence of an article of this sort that I could possibly imagine. It begins in January when the historian Avi Shailon returned to Columbia University from winter break. A thought coursed through his mind: if calm can take hold in Gaza, then perhaps it could happen in Morningside Heights.
Oh my God. Remember the real victims of the war. Jesus fucking Christ.
But he goes on to say, nobody could, he says here, for 2 weeks last spring, an encampment erected by anti-Israel demonstrators swallowed the fields in the center of the compact Manhattan campus. Nobody could enter Butler Library without hearing slogans such as globalize the Intifada and we don't want no Zionists here and burn Tel Aviv to the ground. Grant, I'm sorry for the things I said at the Columbia encampment, by the way. At the end of April, students joined by sympathizers from outside the university gates stormed Hamilton Hall, which houses the undergraduate college dean's office, and then battled police when they sought to clear the building. Because of the threat of spiraling chaos, the university canceled its main commencement ceremony in May.
It sounds like the raid.
Yeah. I mean, what do you make? I mean, Grant, what do you make of Franklin's contention here that nobody could enter Butler Library and that the students battled with the police when they were cleared out Hamilton Hall?
I mean, they certainly couldn't enter Butler Library when the university shut down the entirety of campus to allow hundreds of NYPD officers to, as Felix said, do the raid on a bunch of students. They flashbanged them. Not widely reported. They flashbanged the occupiers.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah, no, that's true.
And wasn't a gun discharged as well?
A gun was discharged accidentally, not at one of the students, thank God, but when they were, as they had their stupid little, a truck that allows them to walk up because they, I guess,
we all saw that on the news. Yeah,
to climb.
Stories.
So they kick down a door, and I'm sure they discover some sort of kinetic situation, and it scares them, and he accidentally fires a gun into a wall.
I just I'm sorry, I'm stuck on the flashbang thing because it's like most people's familiarity with them is in video games. It's the thing you do to stun your enemies if you're doing a non-lethal run. In real life, they can very easily permanently blind, deafen, or kill someone, and have in a lot of fucking cases. And in fact, there are a lot of sub flashbang grenades that SWAT teams use in place just because a flashbang is so, it can go so horribly wrong, and they have killed people on so many occasions. That's fucking insane. I don't use flashbangs when I play Ready or Not for the most part.
I won't pretend to know the difference between a sub flashbang or a flashbang, but I can tell you.
There's nothing called a sub flashbang, but they're stun grenades that aren't as dangerous as flashbangs, I should say.
Okay. Well, from what I heard, and this is on good authority. Yes, they did use stun grenades on students, which is crazy that we're talking about anti-Semitic violence when people were sent to the
When the
hospital.
NYPD is throwing flashbangs at Jewish Columbia students for sitting in a fucking building.
It's completely ridiculous. And now these students who have, some of them went to the hospital. Someone was thrown down a set of stairs by the NYPD. Now they're being expelled because some students reportedly feel sort of unsafe on campus.
Well, like, what was there any incident of violence enacted on any and on any pro-Israel person or any Jewish student by anyone involved in this encampment?
No, not to my knowledge. I mean,
Okay, so yeah,
anybody
a
can come to
phalanx of
approach.
NYPD tanks,
Yeah.
were, I suppose, a proportionate response. But I want to get to this point that Franklin makes. He writes, over the past few years, Colombia's institutional life has become more and more absurd. Confronted with a war on the other side of the world, the course of which the university has zero capacity to affect, a broad swath of the community acted as if the school's trustees and administrators could determine the fate of innocent families in Gaza. Because the protesters treated the war as a local issue, they trained their anger on Jewish and Israeli students and faculty, including Shalon, some of whom have been accused of complicity with the genocide on the with some have been accused of complicity with genocide on the basis of their religious affiliation or national origin. What do you make of Franklin's contention that that the war in Gaza, that the genocide in Gaza is really like it's not a local issue, and that Colombia can't do anything about it? So essentially all acts of protest against it are just a way to stigmatize and isolate Jewish and Israeli students.
Well, I mean, let me put it this way. Colombia has many ways to support the current apartheid regime in Israel. There's financial support through things like the Tel Aviv Global Campus, the dual degree program with Tel Aviv University, which allows for these sort of exchanges of students and cash, as well as like financial investments in Israel through bonds, as well as Israeli companies. But there's also the sort of ideological and political support that these sort of programs give to Israel. I mean, there's an enormously legitimating effect of having like a prestigious American education institution have a campus in your country. This is why Abu Dhabi courted NYU to have their sort of satellite campus there. And besides that, I think there's also a legitimate point to make about places like the School of International and Public Affairs, which routinely, trains up, like suit kids to go into something god awful called like the Organization for Promoting Cultural Freedom in Cuba or something like that.
Yeah, but like, I mean, this idea that that the genocide in Gaza is just a local issue for Gaza is sort of staggering to me, because I return again to the anti-Vietnam protests that took place in Colombia in the 1960s. Like, I mean, is his attitude then that like, well, because realistically, the Columbia University wasn't going to stop the Vietnam War either. But like, I just like, but it's a war that the United States was involved in. If you're a citizen of this country, and like, it's not a local issue. It would be a local issue if this country sent $0 to Israel and gave them no diplomatic or military support. But that's not the case. So, I mean, what do you make of this insistence that like it's just a boutique local issue, and that like by focusing on the university that they're it's frivolous or something like that?
Well, I mean, what do you guys think would happen if Columbia University or Harvard decided to totally divest from Israel? I mean, the fact is that like this would signal a complete break of the American ruling class with Israel. And this is what happened during the apartheid protests. And back then, these sort of ruling classes were sort of divided on this. It became a sort of you couldn't continue to support South Africa under apartheid. It was a PR nightmare. It wasn't very financially profitable anymore. And so that's what allowed the sort of the break with these elite institutions with South Africa. And, the hope is that affecting divestment there will also be able to, schism these sort of elite institutions and like, the American defense establishment, political establishment at large, from supporting Israel. So it's not a local issue. And, but to some people, it is a local issue. We have Palestinian students. We have Arab students. I know people whose family have been bombed. I mean, Mahmoud has been shot by the IDF. And, that's coming out in a documentary soon. It's just ridiculous to pretend like it's just a boutique issue for me to care about a genocide as a Jewish person, but also as somebody who knows Palestinians.
It's just that framing of it has always driven me fucking crazy, because it's like, okay, if this is just any other country and it's insane to care about it, if you're not, the fig leaf they give people, well, if you're not Jewish, you're not Palestinian, it's weird to care about it. Okay, then why does it matter if the a candidate for the fucking lieutenant governor of Illinois signed a BDS thing once? Because the proponents certainly don't treat it like a boutique issue. They treat it like it is the single most important fucking thing in the world, because to them it is.
Exactly, Felix. And like to your point, contra Franklin Bohr over here, this idea that he says, the school's trustees couldn't determine the fate of innocent families in Gaza. Like, they really can't do anything about it. Well, it's just like, if this is all just such a frivolous local issue, it should be fairly easy for Colombia to divest from any company currently profiting off the occupation of Palestine.
Yeah, and like that is such a intellectually weak argument. I mean, Franklin, he spent the entire first Trump term jacking himself off about how brave he was for standing up to Trump. Well, if your articles couldn't spring families from cages, what was the fucking point of them?
Exactly. Yeah. And I don't want to belabor Franklin too much more, but just for Felix, I have to share his experiences at Columbia. Hold on, let me find this.
Making out under the bleachers.
Yeah. Okay, so he says, only after World War II, when America fought a war against Nazism, did this exclusionary system wither away. When speaking of like Jewish quotas, when I attended Columbia for 4 blissful years, a generation or so ago, the school was a Jewish wonderland where I first encountered the pluralism of American Jewish life. I became friends with red diaper babies, kids raised in Jewish socialist family. I dated an Orthodox woman who had converted from evangelical Christianity. Time out.
So
red card.
Pause.
So you met the most insane person who's ever lived. Like, what am I supposed to draw from this? I got a tug job from the craziest lady in Morningside Heights. That's why everyone needs to pledge allegiance to Israel. What?
It's like a woman who traded an insane religion for an even more insane religion.
We were already in weird psychosexual territory when he said Jewish Wonderland. I think that's
your body is a Jewish wonderland.
Like, okay, when was Frank? How old is Franklin for? I'm looking it up because it's just, okay. He was born in 1974. He's making it sound like he grew up in a shtetl, and then when he got to Columbia, he was like, "Oh my God, I don't have to hide my worship anymore." Like, I thought he was at least like born in the 50s or something, but 1974. Yeah, I'm sure you were ducking pogroms until you made it to Columbia.
Well, yeah, Felix, listen to this. He goes, I studied Yiddish with a doyen of the Dying Yiddish Theater and attended lectures with Yosef Yerushalmi, one of the great Jewish historians of his generation. At Columbia, for the first time in my life, I felt completely at home in my identity. Where did he grow up? What the fuck? What the fuck?
Yeah, okay, I'm looking that up too. Oh,
Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C. Yeah, Washington, D.C. in the late 70s and 80s was like, it was like Bavaria in the 1930s.
Yeah, I actually have this guy beat. He mentions Professor Yerushalmi, but I actually have right here a book that belonged to this very same professor.
What?
So I think I win. Loser. The Jewish Wonderland exists in this apartment.
Was that happening in DC in like the mid 80s during Reagan? Like people would knock the knock out of your hands? Worship Christ, Jew boy. That's what they would say in 1985 when he was 11.
He says here, and he gets into some of the allegations against the protests. He says here, although protests against Israel erupted on many campuses after October 7th, the collision between Zionists and anti-Zionists was especially virulent at Columbia. Less than a week after the attack, a woman was arrested in front of the library for allegedly beating an Israeli student who was hanging posters of hostages held in Gaza. Then, in parentheses, the Manhattan district attorney found the woman hadn't intentionally hit the student and dismissed the case after she apologized and agreed to counseling. So basically, like a poster fell on some. Yeah. Well, he doesn't mention that. He says allegedly beating an Israeli student, and then it said the woman hadn't intentionally hit the student. I mean, like, how can you not unintentionally beat someone? I mean, this is clearly like a poster fell on this person, and she was like, "I'm being assaulted."
Yeah, we all saw that video of the guy who's just on the ground and no one is touching him.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm paralyzed. I've been killed.
I was murdered. You were murdered. Okay, you obviously weren't murdered because you're alive and you're basically intact. You weren't murdered, buddy.
It says, soon after the war in Gaza began, the Columbia Daily Spectator interviewed more than 50 Jewish students about their experience. 13 told the student newspaper that they had been attacked or harassed. 12 admitted that they had obscured markers of their Jewish identity, tucking away Star of David necklaces or hiding kippas under caps to avoid provoking the ire of fellow students. I mean, like, I don't want to say anyone is exaggerating or lying here, so I'll just leave
I do. Like, okay, like what kind of fucking methodology is this?
Yeah, no, because they're saying like, oh, I'm hiding visual markers of my Jewish identity for fear of being beaten. But like that's not. I mean, like it's just sort of like you're saying like, oh, I definitely would have been beaten had I just worn my Star of David necklace. But like to me, this is just like it's conflating these like exaggerated instances where someone like got brushed up against with this idea that like, oh, I'm preemptively like hiding my Jewish identity, like I'm hiding out in my dorm like Anne Frank or something. But like I think all of this is like if you are a pro-Zionist Columbia student. Yes, I'd imagine it is uncomfortable for you to be on campus because you have to be confronted with the fact that the majority of your peers have taken a different side of a controversial political issue that is relevant to the country they live in. And I know that that's uncomfortable. It should probably makes you feel upset or maybe even frightened, but like it's not the same as assault or a hate crime.
Well, that's a great point. Didn't all these like Atlantic magazine types just spend the last 15 years writing 10,000 unreadable articles a day about how the university should be a place
modern
for
agora.
uncomfortable ideas? Yeah. And it's like, and now it's like, okay, we should call in the FBI because people feel uncomfortable. Well, fucking which one is it?
Yeah, and I'll say I actually had a Hebrew class with two of the people that I often see representing the sort of the pro-Zionist dox mob that swarms the encampments. I was pretty shocked as somebody who grew up, I didn't grow up Orthodox or conservative, the sort of way that people are almost like brainwashed into feeling like they'll be killed any second for being Jewish. Like these kids would say, the entire world hates Jews. Like over and over, I must have heard that like dozens of times. And I'm like, what kind of like a weird and impoverished existence do you live in that you feel that like the entire world hates your ethnicity? I mean, like, I don't know, like, don't like Koreans think Jews are kind of cool? Like, not everywhere.
pretty much every country in East Asia, like at some point they got a hold of protocols and were like, these people are awesome. Like they got the worst account, like the worst like blood libel, and they're like, they're great. We love them. I mean, I like fucking 10 years ago, I remember I like did a carpool home for Thanksgiving with like two other people I knew in Minneapolis. And when we got back to Illinois, I was like in the car with this kid's dad and him, and they were both like Jewish from the northern suburbs of Chicago. And they were talking to me and they were like, well, it's like really scary that Obama got elected because doesn't he hate Jews? And I was like, no, like, why the fuck do you think that? And we talked about it for like 5 minutes and they were like, they were seriously under the impression that he had made a pledge to the Muslim Brotherhood, like at the start of his career. Well, like it's just so prevalent. Like the ADL, it used to be this organization that like scared the shit out of old people who had, maybe living memories of things like pogroms and the Holocaust and like the American Bund and all this shit. But now it is so fucking widespread. It's insane. It's not just self-victimization. It is an outright delusion, a total fabrication of reality.
One might even say it's a paranoid wonderland. And I get back to the example about like preemptively wearing a baseball hat over your kippah or tucking in your Star of David necklace. Because if there were incidents in which like people were getting a yarmulke knocked off their head or a Star of David necklace ripped off their throat while someone yells kike at them, that would be one thing. But then you're like, the attitude here is like, I know that will happen to me, so I'm preemptively censoring myself. And that's an example of how violent and anti-Semitic the community I've embedded myself in is.
Right. That my reading of this is like, if the former was happening repeatedly and habitually, then the examples we'd be given wouldn't be like one of the examples 4 uses in this article, which is a Jewish professor referring to backers of Zionism as rich white people as an example of anti-Semitism. Which is, I always think is one of the weirdest things. It's anti-Semitic to say Jews are white and then also to say that we're not white. I don't fucking get it. I'm not trying to be glib or like do a gotcha. I don't understand which one is supposed to be offensive or not offensive. It doesn't make sense.
I'm just going to close out here. I mean, he goes on like this about his experience at Columbia and about how evil the campus protests are. But he closes by saying that Trump assault on Columbia has now arrived in its heaviest-handed form. Anti-Semitism on campus, a problem that merits a serious response, has been abused in the course of Trump's quest to remake America in his image. Tellingly, the administration's withholding of federal grants will fall hardest on the hard sciences, which are part of the university most immune to anti-Semitism, and hardly touch on the humanities, where overwrought criticisms of Israel flourishes. Yeah, so like the history department. Or the Middle Eastern Studies Department.
He says hard sciences are like the most immune to anti-Semitism, but I would say history argues differently. It was not an English major sewing twins together.
That's true.
God.
But like, I mean, I get back to this idea that like when I hear, particularly from like people of my parents' generation who are like viciously anti-Mahmoud Khalil, and they want to deport every foreign student in this country who doesn't love Israel as much as they do. I think like the focus is on foreign-born students who are here on visas, because I think this entire worldview is very dependent on the idea that like the virus of anti-Zionism has been introduced to American culture and American universities by being imported by nefarious foreign actors. And what I think these people can't face up to yet is the fact that like this is an organically held belief among millions and millions of Americans, particularly young Americans, who simply have severed any connection they have with this like ethno-nationalist project, or are simply repelled and disgusted by what's taken place over the last year or so. And then like I think they have to face up to that fact and either get down to deporting US citizens or shut the fuck up.